So good afternoon all. So today we shall go through the chapter how do organisms reproduce. Now, why reproduction, or why is it that it's important for us to go through this chapter or even know about it? So just one sentence to say about it is that life will not exist without reproduction. So reproduction is something that is responsible for the life on planet. So it is obviously very important for us to go through why and how reproduction happens. So let us briefly revise and go through how it happens. Now, reproduction is mainly of two modes, asexual reproduction and sexual reproduction. First, let us go through what asexual mode of reproduction means. Now, it is also nothing but the reproduction happening in a single organism where there is just either male or a female one which is responsible for the reproduction. The first kind of, there are various methods of your asexual mode of reproduction. The first kind of method is a fission. So in general also, what does fission mean? It's basically breaking up of something, right? Fission is nothing but breaking up of something. So what is happening exactly here is, so you have a basic cell. So what happens is cell, there is a cell division happening, or the cell goes through fission. So what is happening here? The cell goes through cell division. So if you can see, they're slowly dividing, right? And each division again forms a completely new individual, and there is a reproduction. So this is kind of asexual mode of reproduction. The second kind of, before going to the second kind, some of the examples of the organisms that can go through fission is your bacteria and fungi. The second method of the asexual mode is a fragmentation. So the best example for this could be your Spirogyra. So what exactly happens is they break through into smaller pieces, right? They break through smaller pieces upon maturation. So you have imagine this is a Spirogyra, but it doesn't look like this. Imagine this is a Spirogyra. What happens is upon maturation, it breaks into smaller pieces. And again, these smaller pieces become into an individual organism. So this is nothing but your fragmentation. The third kind of asexual mode of reproduction is your regeneration. So the best example is that your hydra. So what happens hydras now? You have your hydra, right? Now it breaks down, right? So what basically regeneration is, you can break it into how many ever pieces you want, and each piece will come back to an individual hydra. So this picture is what is saying. So I'll break it into pieces, not exactly break into pieces, it gets divided into pieces, and then it forms a individual organism separately. So this is nothing but regeneration. Now the next kind of asexual mode could be vegetation propagation. Now what is vegetation propagation? Parts like roots, stems or leaves of a plant can develop into new plant. So a very classic example I could give you for this is your rose. So usually what we do, we have a rose plant. If you want a new rose plant, what we do? We just cut the root and place it. Sorry, not the root. We just cut the stem and we place it. And from that stem, a new rose plant grows. So that is a kind of vegetation propagation. Another kind of asexual mode of reproduction is budding and spore formation. So this was about your asexual mode of reproduction. Now let us come to sexual reproduction. Now in sexual reproduction, let us first go through your flowering plants. Now again, in sexual reproduction, we have two kinds. One is the unisexual and other is bisexual. By the name itself, we will understand uni means one. So what does unisexual mean? It is either the male or the female egg which is responsible for the reproduction. Whereas in your bisexual reproduction, it is both the male and the female which have equal importance causing the reproduction. Now the examples for unisexual is papaya, watermelon, whereas your bisexual, it is hibiscus, mustard, etc. Now let us go through how the bisexual reproduction happens, and we'll use hibiscus as the example to explain the reproduction process. Now if you can see the picture of hibiscus, so this is a rough sketch of your hibiscus. So in this stamen is nothing but the male part of the flower, and which has anther and pollen. So those pollen grains or pollen. So when you touch the plant, you will feel that grainy texture, right, which is yellow in color, which sticks to your hand. This is nothing but the pollen or the male gamete. And then you also have something called as the filament. So the filament and the stamen, which has the anther and the pollen, are the male parts of a flower. Now, coming to the female part, it is the carpel or the pistil. If you see here, this entire thing is the pistil, which is the female reproductive or the female part of the plant. Now, stigma. What is stigma? So, stigma is pollen. Stigma is a place. If you can see here, this is the stigma. Now, what is stigma? Stigma is the place where the pollen grains come and settle down. Now, what is style? Style is nothing but the tube-like structure which consists of your ovary. Now, what is ovary here? Ovary is nothing but it's the female part of the hibiscus or the female part of the flower. Now, let us see how exactly the reproduction happens or the process. And the first step is the pollination. Now, pollination could happen through either self-pollination or cross-pollination. Now, what is pollination? It is a process of transfer of pollen from anther to stigma. So, what is pollination? Pollination is nothing but the transfer of pollen from anther to stigma. Now, anther is what? Anther is nothing but the male reproductive part of the plant, which is where you have the pollen. So, what is going to happen in the first step, pollination? The pollens from here go and settle down on the stigma. What is second step? Second step is nothing but fertilization. So, what is fertilization? Fertilization is nothing but the formation of the zygote. Now, what happens during the process of fertilization? The male gamete present in the pollens. So, pollens are the ones which have the male gamete. Now, what will happen during the process of fertilization? The male gamete present in the pollen joined with the female gamete present in the ovule. So, what is going to happen? So, this is the picture of the entire where the major reproduction or the process happens. So what happens, as I told you, the pollen grains come and settle down at the stigma, right? So this is the stigma. The pollen grains come down at the stigma. What happens after that? The fertilization takes place. The male gamete present in the pollen join the female gamete present in the ovule. So if you see here, this is the ovary, right? This is the ovary and this is the ovule. So what happens? They join together and there is something called as the pollen tube formation, okay? There is something called as a pollen tube formation, which I am redrawing and showing it to you. Okay. Now this is a passage. This is a passage through which your male germ travels. Male germ travels and joins the female gamete. Right. I'll repeat that again. So pollen tube. So if you can see here, this is a pollen tube through which the male germ cell travels and goes to the female gamete, right, where fertilization takes place. Now, after the fertilization, obviously what has to happen? There will be formation of fruits and seeds. Now, after the zygote formation, so what happens after this is come here, after it is fertilized, what is going to happen to the rest part of the flower? You have your petals, you have your sepals, all of them just dry and they fall off after the process of fertilization. Now, ovary is nothing but the fruit. Ovary is nothing but the fruit, and ovule becomes a seed. What happens to the ovary? Ovary becomes the fruit, and ovule becomes the seed. And the final step is nothing but the germination. Now, what is germination? Germination is nothing but the beginning of the growth of a new plant. So, what happens? Now, as I told you, zygote formation happens right after the fertilization. There is zygote formation or the formation of fruit and seeds. Now, if you see inside this, okay, so this is called as the cotyledon. What does cotyledon mean? It is basically the one which stores the food. Obviously, once the seed has come, when we are planting the seed in the ground, obviously it doesn't have any support for the nourishment. So what happens is, the seed, if you break it down, if you open it like this, it on the left hand side, it has something called as a cotyledon, which is nothing but, or the function of the cotyledon is to store the food for the growth of the seed into a plant. Now, the right side of the seed is nothing but the future shoot. What does that mean? This is responsible for the shoot growth, whereas the center part is the one which is responsible for the root formation. So what happens? This stores food this starts to grow as a root. That's why I'm writing, it's called as a radicle, the center part, that is responsible for the root formation. And this right side part of the, the zygote of the seed is nothing but the future shoot from where the shoot starts to grow. So this is how the reproduction happens in a bisexual plant. We have taken hibiscus as an example to explain this. After this, now we shall go through human reproduction system and learn how reproduction happens in humans. So now that we have learned about the the reproduction in plants, let us now come to the main topic, which is the human reproduction. So in order to explain about the reproduction, let us first go through the female reproductive system and the kind of hormones and what exactly happens in the female reproductive system. So this is your female reproductive system. So this has 2 ovaries, right? And this is the fallopian tube, and this is your vagina, cervix, and this is your uterus. Now, so ovary is the place, or it is the primary reproductive organ for females. Now, the main function of your ovary is the production of the eggs or the secretion of your hormones. So this is where the ovary is the place where your eggs get accumulated or produced. Now, what is the function of the fallopian tube? Is that basically they transfer the eggs from the ovary to the uterus, and also the site of fertilization is nothing but the fallopian tube. So fallopian tube is the region where the fertilization happens. Now I have told you what is fertilization means. Fertilization is basically when the male and the female hormone come together. Now what exactly happens is this. Now when the eggs get produced in the ovary, they travel to the fallopian tube and they wait there for the male sex hormone, that is the sperm, to come there so that the fertilization happens. Now this can happen between the day 0 to 15 days. Now if the sperm doesn't come by that time, it is where the progesterone hormone says that it's the fertilization is not happening. So what happens is the eggs come out and they settle down in the tissue called as the endocrine, and they come out as blood, which we usually refer to as periods. Now let's come to the male reproductive system. Now this picture depicts the male reproductive system, which has a testis, scrotum, vas deferens, and uterus, and seminal vesicle, bladder, prostate gland, penis, and urethra. Now, in the male, it is the testosterone, which is the hormone which is responsible for the reproduction. Now, testis, the main function or the main, it is the main function is nothing but the secretion of testosterone and also the production of sperm. So, testis is the region where you have the production of sperm. And vas deferens is the place, or it is the one which is responsible for delivering the sperm from the testis to the urethra and then later to the female reproductive system. Now that we have learned the how human reproduction happens, this is also something called as sexually transmitted diseases which are caused during the sexual intercourse. So they are nothing but AIDS and syphilis. AIDS is one which is caused by the it's a viral infection, whereas the syphilis is a bacterial infection. So the important questions that could be asked, or possible questions, I'll just go through that briefly. So beginning with asexual mode of reproduction, they won't ask you directly, but they could ask explain with a suitable illustration or with a diagram how regeneration happens, or in a spirogyra how the reproduction happens. They won't ask you define fission or define fragmentation. That's a possible question. But they could ask like this also, where they'll ask you to draw the diagrams, like show how the regeneration happens in hydra or how the reproduction happens in your spirogyra. And then coming to your sexual reproduction. So again, all of 1 marker questions possible here, like which is the part of the plant that is for the which is the male gamete or the female gamete. What is pollination? What is self-pollination? What is cross-pollination? And then how the zygote formation happens in the plant, and what is the role of the pollen tube, what is the role of your stigma, what are pollen grains. All of these are possible 1 marker questions. And then coming to your human reproduction system, again lot of 1 marker 2 marker questions possible here, where they'll ask like what is the male, name the male hormone, name the female hormone, what is that which is responsible for the delivery of sperm from testis to urethra. All of these 1 marker questions possible. And they'll also ask you to draw the diagram and explain the male reproductive system briefly with the diagram. Similarly, they'll ask you for probably 3 mark questions. Explain female reproductive system with a diagram, and definite questions from your sexually transmitted diseases and how it can be cured, or how it can not cured if they can't be cured, how it can be controlled, or how can be prevented. So that is a possible questions. So definitely one of the 3 diagrams will be asked, like either female, male, or the reproduction in the plants.